Should be topic number 3 tonight. By the way, I just want to say thanks to all of you who are in attendance tonight. You guys make it all worthwhile. Even though the numbers are small, the conversations are big, and I appreciate all you guys who come here, especially you guys who are regulars, who come every week, like Trigger Happy and guys like that, only in them, and of course Buana and Black Steel. I really appreciate you guys for coming through. Shout out to all of you. Oh, and shout out to Dorico Cooper and Sister Raw for their donations this week to the show. I will put it to good use as far as the show is concerned. Thanks again. Should be topic number 3 tonight. What can the false propaganda of yesteryear tell us about what's presented to us today? This comes with a link that's taking us to Twitter. And what we have here is a tweet from Z_Squirrel. Says former senior CIA agent John Stockwell, quote, "We pumped dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. We ran fake photographs that made every paper in the country. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create the illusion of communists eating babies for breakfast," end of quote. This came with a video. We'll watch it, and then we'll comment on it.
Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. 400 journalists cooperating with the CIA, including some of the biggest names in the business, to consciously introduce the stories into the press.
Well, give me a concrete example of how you use the press this way, how a false story is planted and how you got it published.
Well, for example, in my war, the Angola war that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Times, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Times. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was. And we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. In one case, we had the Cuban rapists caught and tried by the Ovimbundu maidens who had been their victims. And then we ran photographs that made almost every newspaper in the country of the Cubans being executed by the Ovimbundu women who supposedly had been their victims.
These were fake photos?
Oh, absolutely. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast and that sort. Totally false propaganda.
So imagine what's going on right now with the Palestinian Zionist stuff going on right now, right? This is the name of the game, and we're not doing anything to create our own propaganda, positive propaganda, Like Yana B said, the original creator of fake news only said, "We appreciate you too." Yeah, I appreciate all you guys. Brother Bakari, Forecast, all you guys who come around and make Shoot the Breeze worth something. Urzuli, Kevin Kare, who I know is watching behind the scenes here. I appreciate all you guys. Shoot the Breeze topic number 3 says, what can the false propaganda of yesteryear tell us about what's presented to us today? Let me start with Black Steel. Let me hear what Black Steel's got to say.
So Malcolm X did say years ago that the newspapers, if you're not careful, the newspaper will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. So we still see that same formula. I think I might have said this on Twitter as well. Every accusation made by the oppressor is actually a confession, because here he is talking about, and just for example, talking about Cubans, but the CIA had had someone who literally blew up a plane over Cuba, killing hundreds of innocent people, and yet he was protected by the United States. So here we are, them accusing the Cubans of atrocities. Meanwhile, the United States was harboring a Cuban terrorist. So again, we have to be careful. And I think now, and especially this generation, I think we're starting to see more of a pushback, because a lot of us remember all the bullshit propaganda that was pushed, especially leading up to Iraq, the Iraq War, all the weapons of mass destruction that they supposedly never found, uh, the Iraqi soldiers going into Kuwait and taking babies out of incubators. That was another lie they told. So people have started to kind of see through the nonsense, which is why we're seeing such a ramping up of this propaganda. Now first Hamas beheaded 40 babies, then it was one baby, then it was no babies. Then you come to find out that Israel is sending in missiles with blades on it, so that way it can cut people to shreds. They're using white phosphorus to cause third degree burns, which is supposed to be a weapon that's supposed to be banned in war. You know how that goes. But yeah, so overall, just looking at this nonsense. Yeah, you have to look at this propaganda and be aware where it's coming from. Where is the source of this propaganda? What are they trying to make me feel? So when it's presented to us today, I think we really have to. I think we're more aware of it now than we were back then. Number one, I think that's a good thing. We're more we understand the when it's coming towards us. When you have the president of the United States who's repeating um, regurgitated lies from Israeli propaganda, which we've already proven not to be. So we understand now this, because people aren't believing it. Now more people of higher levels have to repeat the propaganda. But okay, well, since the president says it, it must be true. We're not falling for that anymore. We're not, and the less it works, the more of it you're going to see. And I think they understand that they're losing um, the propaganda war, and now they're just going to come with straight out naked violence. So I'll leave it there. Thanks, Coco.
Black Sea, before you go, before I hand it over to Buana, how would you define what is a Zionist? Brother Bakari was asking that question in the chat. I'll give my answer later too, but I'm just curious. What do
So
you how would you define it?
I would define a Zionist as someone who believes in a specific homeland for the Jewish people. So Zionism was started by a Jewish atheist named Theodor Herzl, who believed that the reason Jewish people suffered is because they lack a homeland. So this is way back in during the days of the Ottoman Empire. The Zionist idea of creating a Jewish state, a Jewish nation state. The only thing with that idea of a Jewish nation state is that you have this whole idea of God's chosen people. So even back in the early 1900s, late 1900s, early 20th century, you had these Zionists who were willing to ally themselves with oppressive governments such as the Ottomans, such as the British, to create their own so-called Jewish state. They didn't really care where it was, actually. We talk about Israel, but the Zionists were looking to settle um, in Madagascar, in Uganda. Palestine really became a focal point later on. But really, Zionism is more of like it's a ethnic term. It's more like it's an ideology of um, just creating a Jewish homeland. Many people consider Zionism to be racism because the Zionist project has created an apartheid state within, which is Israel, which legally discriminates against the Arab population, prevents them from, the free exercise of freedoms in the country. So yeah, I would define a Zionist as someone of a Jewish ultra national. You don't have to necessarily be, um, I guess, because again, I was saying, yeah, the first Zionist was actually an atheist, so he wasn't connected to the Jewish religion, but they have conflated the two to the point where if you're against Zionism, you're against Judaism. So they, I'll just leave it there. It's more like, I would say it's Jewish ultra right nationalism is what I would say Zionism is, and it really is a racist ideology at its core.
Yeah, I wouldn't even put Jewish in it, because it's really not even about the religion. It's just uh, uh, like Black Seal said, it's just because also I'll say this: a lot of the small hats, a lot of the Jews, they don't even agree with it. They understood it was like a colonization effort. Every time there's these skirmishes, and I saw Oni talking about this on Twitter, and I appreciated those tweets, Oni. We don't a lot of our folks in particular don't understand what war is, and it's usually it's like a land/resources grab, and Zionism was just a way of war. It was a way of taking these people out. Every time you hear about some skirmish between these two sets of people in that region, the Palestinian people have less land after it's done. I remember early in this recent skirmish, they said, "Oh, the Israelis took something. I forgot what it was, some land or structure." And I'm like, "Okay, the Palestinians ain't getting that shit back." So it's just a war machine. That's what Zionist really is. A war
I like
machine.
something. I'm sorry, Coco. Let me cut you. I like something that Anthony McPhail said. He said, "Manifest destiny," and that is that idea of manifest destiny. It is our destiny. That's the same ideology that drove the white settlers in North America to steal and colonize the North American continent. The idea that we are destined by God to spread from sea to shining sea, and we don't give a fuck whose land it is or who was here before us. We're taking their shit. So it is, manifest destiny at the very at in all. It's just settler colonialism, the same ideology that did the United States and South Africa, and which is why they have always been close allies with the state of Israel. They've always, Israel has always supported apartheid South Africa. United States has always supported Israel. These are all different heads on the same deadly viper. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll leave it there.
No, no, it's all good. It's all good. It's yeah, it's more of that I'm white and I say so type stuff. I watched a video the other day where a white guy, a so-called Jew, probably from Brooklyn, right here in New York City, is in some of these Palestinians' house, and it's like, yo, don't blame me. It's not my fault. And they're outside looking at this dude instead of fucking taking a big stone and bust his head or something. They're looking at this slovenly white boy with a small hat on, talking about it's not my fault. And what is he talking about? The fact that he went in these people's house and take their house. It's a land grab. It's a war machine. Buana, what say you to all of it?
Yeah, so I can do it like this. Okay, so let me start with the Zionist end. So a person who really spoke to a good degree on this topic was Kwame Ture. In terms of what Zionism is, there's a wonderful video on YouTube with Kwame Ture giving a lecture on Zionism, and there was a Jewish person in the audience who debated with him for a while. Very good lecture. He gave a lot of information in terms of Zionism and the Zionist ideology, and referenced a lot of material on the idea. Me personally, I believe that a Zionist is a Israeli nationalist. And I believe that when we say, and I get challenged the brothers on something, because when we say the actions of the Israeli is immoral, because they are extremists in what they do, because children die, mothers die, women die. When we say that, when Khalid Muhammad was referencing South Africa, and he said that we're gonna give them a certain amount of time to leave South Africa. The boys, the white boys. And he's like, if they don't leave, we're gonna kill the women, we're gonna kill the children, we're gonna kill the babies. Now he is seen as a black nationalist. Right? He is seen as a black nationalist. He believes that the rightful people who belong in that land are the black population. So when he says that he wants the other people to be removed, he is a nationalist as well. But his nationalism is just black nationalism. Some would say that's extreme. Some wouldn't say that's extreme. Who knows? I'm just saying. They sound similar. They sound similar. When in Zimbabwe, when the Zimbabweans, the black Zimbabweans, was taking back the land or going into the white Zimbabwean people's houses and reclaiming their land, they was practicing black nationalism. Yeah, and some people like look at that and say, well, that's horrible. How could they just take another person's land? That white person should have bust that black person in their head for going into his home and taking his land away from him. It's just perspective. All this is just I wanted to give some perspective. Needless to say,
But
the first thing, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me interject. So there was a Israeli leader, a woman by the name of Golda Meir. Golda Meir, I remember this myself personally, did an interview in the 80s where she said, listen, Israel was created in 1948. My passport, she said, I'm Palestinian. My passport says I'm Palestinian. My birth certificate says I'm Palestinian. What am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that when Khalid was talking about this stuff, or when, what's his name? I can't remember the leader's name now, who sent all them Indians and stuff back out of the country.
Idi Amin. Idi Amin.
Idi Amin, right? That was those people's land. South Africa, that was those people's land before. I mean, and it's understood that the boy is a foreigner who came there. Just like it's understood the Israeli is a foreigner who was from Europe somewhere and came there. Now, Brother Bakari made an interesting point. He said the Palestinians took the land from some people that was there before them. I don't know the history before the Palestinians got there, so I have to feign ignorance there. But whoever it was, if they took the land, them people should bust their head too. You understand?
Yeah, I would just be mischievous.
Romans?
I don't know. I was just being mischievous. In that question.
Arabs have been in Palestine since the first century.
All right, Buana, continue though. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. I was just being mischievous. But in terms of propaganda, yeah, I know this guy. This guy is John Stockwell, and he was basically describing what he did in the Angolan War and in terms of Cuba and things of that nature, because he was fighting for his country and doing what he was doing. And there are many people like these who come out after the fact and express what they did. I think there was another guy called John Perkins. He wrote this book called The Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He's another one of these spooks who, after having done mischievous things all over the so-called third world, they come out and confess some of the things of what they do. But I believe the CIA, when they hear these guys come out after the fact, they create patches to ensure that their methodologies are the same but a little bit different. Because now the people who are hearing these kinds of statements or confessions, they build up defenses against people coming into the territory and trying to do the same kinds of acts. So I think that they correct it, and there's a level of sophistication that's going on right now in the world, where we are living in a so-called information age, and the exposure is just out there and so vast. The powers that be, these unseen people, they fortify what they do with other kinds of methods and methodologies in trying to convince the hearts and minds of people to sway in one direction or another. Granted, the masses are really ignorant. The masses among us are completely ignorant to the fact, so they don't necessarily need to change their methods and methodologies fundamentally. But I believe that there's greater sophistication going on in trying to convince the hearts and minds of a lot of people to to believe in one particular thing over another. I believe that it's more sophisticated now. And even Kwame Ture talked about propaganda as well, in terms of what happened in the Black Panther organization, and how they was how they was being propagandized within the organization by external forces like the FBI. So these things have happened, but I think that they become more sophisticated as more information gets out there, because you have these people who are former CIA people confessing what they would have done when they was working for the other side. So it's just a whole lot of sophistication that goes along with it. And really, if you really want to keep up with these things, man, I don't know, people call you a conspiracy theorist, but it's just a lot, man. It's just a lot. But I'll stop there.
Conspiracy theorist is a derogatory term, often used to kind of throw you off the trail, I feel. Because if you go to the average person and tell them, in the whole Cuban U.S. conflict, the U.S. was pumping false images, most people will say, "Ah, man, you just on some conspiracy shit." But then here comes this white boy here, and he tells you, "Yeah, that's what we was doing." You know what I mean? Afro Native World says the history states the first people of Palestine were Ethiopians, Africans. All right, so my bad on that. I didn't know that, although I suspected that was the case, because look where this region of the world is, right? It borders on Egypt and stuff like that. MG2 you were in, but you dropped off for some reason. Shout out to Real Black Gentleman who's out there in the chat. Real Black Gentleman got me in some drama this past week here. Him and what's that brother name? I Can Fire. But in the meantime, let's welcome in Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari, how are you this week?
I'm great, man. How about you? Everybody on the panel and in the chat. Y'all can hear me, right?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Yes, sir. Loud and clear. So we talk propaganda, right? Now we talk about how white people lie. And I'm not saying this white person here is telling the truth. But how would we know this white boy right here is telling the truth? And I'm just saying, I'm not saying he's lying. I don't know. But we really don't know if this white boy is telling the truth either. So when it comes to propaganda, and I heard what Black Steel said about Malcolm, man, how the newspaper or the news can have propaganda to have the oppressed people loving the oppressor. Look, my thing is, the propaganda for me is Black people saying, let's stand for Palestine, when they have areas in Palestine today called Al-Abid, which mean the slaves, where they have put the Black people in Palestine. So the propaganda is really working in my things, because we want to stand for everybody we seem as oppressed. But if we stop and look at those people that seem to be oppressed, look and see that they take time out during their oppression to oppress other Black people, like the Palestinians. And I'm not telling nobody who to stand with or who to rock with. I don't care. But when we talk about propaganda, the propaganda is absolutely, propaganda can be used in a good way, can be used in a bad way. The propaganda against Black people, the images and the way they say about Black people, it absolutely works. It works so much that they don't have to do it anymore. We show the negative images and talk the negative images and talk all the negative stuff about Black people. So when we talk propaganda, a lot of us a lot of people don't absolutely understand. I know I truly don't understand. I understand what it is, but it's just certain things that I see, and we, as some people who would say is I don't know, pro-Black, I guess. I see us fall for propaganda, and we fall for the propaganda, and we end up fighting ourselves. And on that, I give the mic.
Uncle Bakari, before you go, right? can could the black woman is God be good propaganda?
Yes.
Oh
Can the
God,
black
here
woman is
we
God
go.
be
Here
propaganda?
we go.
Yes, the black woman. Yes, the black woman is God is propaganda. It absolutely propaganda to try to make a black man to see something that they came from as something great. But we can't see that. So yes, it is propaganda. See, we fall for the negative propaganda and want to put every black person, every black woman in a group with something like, let's say, Lil Kim. Because I ain't gonna just talk about what the young people doing today. I can talk about what people listened to back in the day. I ain't gonna say the one named Red. I'm gonna say Lil Kim, right? So then we'll put every black woman in that box. Just like when Keith Lee went to Atlanta and did his review of black restaurants. I think he went to 4 restaurants. Black people on YouTube took it and ran it and made it be all black businesses. So yes, it can be good propaganda. Saying the black man is God, that's good propaganda. So you can look and see yourself as something great. So you don't accept the fact when somebody come tell you you ain't shit. Then you would have the nuts to stand up to that, unless you really feel that you ain't shit. And the propaganda has worked on black people.
Awesome
That's my
answer.
take.
Awesome answer.
No, Bakari, I agree with you. I agree with I don't have a problem with that propaganda. The black woman is God, except for I think our people tend to take some of that propaganda and they don't complete the work. That's my only concern with that stuff. I have no problem, like the young kid earlier in the earlier prompt who said his mother is God. I have no problem. I thought about Bakari when the kid said it. I have no problem with that thinking. My only issue is a lot of our folks who need to do the work to get to that title won't do it. They'll just blanket themselves in the title. It's like Jamaicans saying that they're the fastest people in the world. No, you have Usain Bolt who's fast, and you have them sisters who run for the national team, right? But is the average dude in Portmore fat? You know what I mean? Come on. So that's the only push back if you want to consider that pushback. But I appreciate that type of propaganda. Like Afro Native World mentioned earlier, when the black woman was only spoken about, yeah, the black man is God too. Then I have no problems with that. Let's welcome in MG2 this week. MG2, how are you this week?
Doing good.
Good.
Always good to listen to you guys. I love this the commentary on propaganda. And one thing that I learned, Neil, because that is an English term, or I should say a European term, for the deception that Europeans do in order to create a social or a physical or even a military type of outcome. And propaganda is really useless unless it is turned into something material. I think of what's his name, Stryker, I believe, back in the 40s. Or I could even go with Joseph Goebbels, who literally was a propagandist. But he was nothing until all of a sudden his propaganda was put into something that materialized, and a bunch of small hats ended up for dinner. They were cooked at 350 degrees at 20 minutes in the ovens. So the thing is I really like those, the whole perspective of what propaganda is, because it is, again, a system of European deception that others use for a certain extent. Now, where it comes with Africans, I tend to wonder if things that we might call propaganda have actually been used. And maybe they have. I think maybe in the days of the Haitian Revolution, there was propaganda in order for us to win there. I'm pretty sure that was effective. You saw it over there in Vietnam, quite extensively in Vietnam, where Vietnamese, they had their own forms of, but they turned it into something material, and you see the outcome. And it reminded me of, I think it was Black Steel was bringing up what was going on in Iraq when, they said the babies in the incubator, stuff like that. That's propaganda. The same kind of propaganda got Emmett Till murdered. The same kind of propaganda. I mean, it's relentless. The thing is as an African, I tend to think in modern times, what are we using in terms of our own self-instilled propaganda, and has it been something that materialized and something we can use where we could go ahead and use it to our advantage? I tend to think not. When the whole comments came in about what is Zionism, and is again another European term for European construct, and I'm glad that I think it was Black Steel that brought up. I mean, I think that's the name I heard brought up Theodor Herzl, who was an atheist. But the thing is, Zionism in and of itself it's basically a business organization. Bottom line, I always look and say, what if somebody asks me, what is this so-called moniker, organization, whatever? I say, what has it done? What is it doing? And what does it intend to do? Then therefore, I could actually have a definition of what that thing is. I mean, it's very simple. If you know that something swims, you know that that's always swam, you know that it's swimming right now, then you know that more than likely it's going to swim in the future. Chances are it's going to be a fish, a dolphin, a whale, or a duck, or something of that nature. It's very easy to go ahead and decipher. So when you brought up the term of what is Zionism, what have they done? Well, we could go through their so-called history. I just call it the record because you see what the record was, whether it was that quote unquote Palestinian Nakba and all the other things that, of course, that's not an African term, that's Arabs, But the thing is, I say, what are they doing? And they're doing what they did back then. And it wasn't necessarily for pretty much ideology, because the individual that created it definitely had no dogma or any kind of dogmatic type of, spiritual, reality. His thing was, look, this is business. We got oil in this place. We've got this, we've got that. Now let's use somebody to go ahead and be our figurehead in order to take over this area that the Ottoman Turks have abandoned because, Europe's kicking their butt. So I said, what are they doing right now? Well, it's the same thing. If you see what's going on over there in that place they call Palestine, and I say they call Palestine because that's what they called it, not me. Well, the thing is they're doing the same thing that they did back then. It's a business organization. Of course, it entails the headline of, oh, these are Jews or whatever they call themselves. And of course, they'll if you see what they're doing, it's definitely, taking land, taking things from others for business purposes. And then I say, what do they intend to do? And if you do some research, you're going to find out exactly what they intend to do, which is what I've been basically harping on for the last, month and a half. They intend to go ahead and secure supply chains. They intend to go ahead and secure natural resource. They intend to go ahead and secure what I call the war of state, which is a war of borders, not ideology and not resource. So I say, yeah, okay, well, this is what businesses do. We could just call them in the stock trading world, we call it a hostile takeover. Ain't no different. So when I look at that, I see where the relationship of Africans is with these terms, i.e. propaganda, i.e. passport bros, i.e. Zionism, and I say, what's our relationship to these quote unquote terms? Is it something that we've used, or are we going to use, or have we used to gain an advantage against other folks who are definitely using their terms and their propaganda to take an advantage over us? These are just little things that I have to ask myself. I know I'm a little loquacious, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there. I'll go ahead and pass the mic.
Much appreciate. I thank you for coming through. Does anyone want to comment to what MG2 had to say just now? Okay. In the chat, Yana B says, "I am a god." Yeah, I feel you, Yana B. I agree. I agree. Sister Raw is out there saying greetings to everyone. Sister Raw, I shouted you out earlier. Thank you for the donation this week. Thanks again. Wanna go ahead?
I don't mean to cut you off. I just was really I was digesting some of the things that MD2 was saying. If a corporation is to be, if what the Jews are doing is to be looked at in terms of a business or a corporation or a company, then you should be kind of attached no morality to what they're actually doing. So, like you say, it's a hostile takeover. So the death of children, women, and all that stuff, like we are just simply trying to ensure the chains, the business chains. So despite what we're doing, ultimately our purpose is just to in fact do this particular thing as a business, as a corporate entity. So there's no morality that comes into play. You know what I mean? So I don't know. So if I were to say that black folks in the West to take that Jewish model in terms of what they're doing, and a bunch of us ideologically decide we are going to create a company, let's call it the Black Company, and we are going to go into a territory and say, like, practice gunboat diplomacy, the same thing the Spaniards did with Christopher Columbus them and the Jews are currently doing right now in Palestine. We're going to take over this territory. Is that would you consider that to be a right kind of company model to use in terms of taking over a territory in a hostile way? Yeah, I mean, would you consider that to be the right approach in terms of doing that kind of thing? To try to establish supply chains within the Western Hemisphere or in America, if you decide to, a bunch of Americans decide to do it, Black Americans decide to do it, would you consider that to be a something that we could look at doing in terms of trying to establish supply chains for us in the West?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I would think, first of all, I would think African people would never go into a place that's inhabited, destroy the people's land, steal them, put them in open air prisons and concentration camps. I don't really see African people doing that type of behavior. We got to be careful not to emulate and do what the European did to get to where they are in life. I think sometimes we lose sight of that. We see what Europe has done and we see what other people have done. Should we do that? No, I don't think we should do what the Zionists have done. I mean, it's settler colonialism. I mean, that would be basically doing to other people what was done to Africans in South Africa or in Zimbabwe. Or in Kenya. So we're not. I would definitely think we don't need to emulate that type of behavior.
Is that
Yes,
the
I
nature?
think.
Is that the nature?
I'm sorry.
Is
Go ahead.
that the is that the nature? Is that the nature? Cut off your mic, brother Bakari. Cut off your mic, brother Bakari. Is that the nature of human beings? Might makes right. The person with, unfortunately, we are seeing this instance. Maybe is it just in European history? Maybe I could just or Arab history or Chinese history. Yeah, where might makes right. People exert so-called power through force. Now that's ugly, because we live in a society that says, well, you must be respectful of your brother and mankind and all these things. But how is that something that human beings have actually practiced throughout human history? You know what I mean? Or have they practiced the idea of might makes right, gunboat diplomacy? I'm just asking the question. You know what I mean? But I concede, Black Steel. It's immoral to do. It's not. I don't consider it to be the best thing to do. I don't consider the fact that we should copy another person's strategy in terms of getting supply chains and things of that nature. But I'm saying that if you look at human history, isn't this what human beings have practiced throughout human history in terms of getting the things that they have gotten, in terms of creating nation states and doing all these other things? It's through acts of force, power, and sometimes ugliness. You know what I mean? But I would just stop there. I'm just asking the question.
I think
Yes, that's been the role.
Go ahead, Ricardo.
That's been the role of the male animal. Every male animal, a man animal. That's what they do. Well, we understand we animals. Name the man animal, predator, omnivore. Name them. You can't name a man animal, and that's not what they do. We look at everything as moral, and what we consider moral. But the rest of the world don't consider this shit moral. So are we actually moral? Because everybody then did what white folks have done. We Genghis Khan and Mongolians did it way for them, kicked the white folks' ass, the Arabs, they did it to everybody. Arabs have done it. White folks, the Europeans have done it. The group of people that haven't done it is still looking at something as moral. And the group of people who still look is the group of people that actually, a lot of this group of people still want to be friends with other people that was oppressed. And the only reason they're oppressed because they took something from somebody, then some people came and took something from them. And that's how the world, the one group of people that haven't taken anything from nobody, don't have a military to defend themselves. We're not trying to create anything to defend ourselves. So if you look at the animal kingdom, that's what animals do. You can look at the gorillas, the chimps, the lions, the leopards, the jaguars, the crocs, the hippos. That's what men do. I'm just saying. I don't necessarily see it as immoral. I don't. That's my take on it. I feel it back.
Can,
Before someone else goes, two things. So StreamYard told me when Bakari and MG2 came in that you were on Android or Google devices or something like that. And I guess for some reason, Google devices, Androids, give a lot of feedback and stuff like that. I just got that notification a second ago. Second of all, damn it, I forgot the second thing I was going to say. It'll come back to me later. MGT, you go ahead in the meantime.
Yeah, hopefully this is not feeding back. Yes, I think I got that notice too. I really like where Black Steel is going with this because it gives me the ability to present a lot of questions. And I'm glad that Brother Bakari also had helped clarify a few things that I've been talking about for, like the last 50 years. There's something that I learned, and that's self-preservation is the key to common sense. I mean, that's, just what common sense is, to be around. That's what intelligence is. Intelligence comes from the ability to want to go ahead and make sure that you're going to live another day. Because I think that it's not only just, animals or male animals at that. It's just common sense says, hey, if something is a detriment to the ability for you to see another, a sunrise, then you're going to do whatever it is to go ahead and make sure that threat is alleviated. I mean, I've seen little dogs go up against giraffes. So clearly there's, some common sense and intelligence within the self-preservation mechanism of all living species, except for some. And I'm not going to say, because I don't like, a lot of times, a lot of Black folk don't like me saying this, but it's quite obvious. I'm glad that the question was asked, especially in terms of, the fact that, that we don't want to take the ways of those who have already proven themselves, for lack of a better term. I want to use the term conquerors or, settler colonials or whatever. I mean, those are, again, other frame of reference that's not a frame of reference coming from an African. That's a frame of reference of what others' activities have done to Africans and others. But irrespective of that, the thing that I tend to think of is, first, I saw Yoni post something in the chat is, yeah, I understand, I agree, I can understand that, but what do you do? Okay, what do you do when faced with an opposition to your survival? What is the common tactic in order to, gaining supply chains, even if you have to go and use a gun, is not just gaining supply chains so you could go ahead and put somebody else's frame of reference called money in your pocket. It's also a mechanism of survival so your community can survive. That's been happening throughout throughout time. Okay, we see lions and hyenas do it every day when there's a fresh kill. The thing is I can understand, and I'm glad Black Steel brought that up because it really presents a lot of very simplistic questions like, what do you do if not? Well, I tend to think like a forest fire, you fight fire with a better fire. And even if everything burns to the ground, your fire will go out last. Because the thing is if not, you will be consumed by smoke inhalation of someone else burning you down. And clearly that has happened. When I said every species looks at that thing of self-preservation other than one, I look at what species has been the most reactionary species throughout the dawn of human record. I want to say history, but I'm going to say the record. Because if you look at where each species is in terms of their survival right now today, you can see that was built by a record of something that is basically culminated into where that species is today. I look at different species like the Anglo, like the Arab, like the Asian and others. And where are they at today in that self-preservation mechanism to keep themselves alive and keep themselves, perpetuating their species? I look at that and then I look at the African. Then I say, who is more proactionary and who is more reactionary? And reactionary is not fighting that fire with fire or building a better bomb or building a better gun or cutting some necks. Reactionary is definitely I see that more in African. I may be wrong, but I see it more in African. And then I say, where are we at through those activities, through that record that we've built up of being more reactionary than proactionary? You know, not being settler colonialists that we should. You know, I mean, we should be taking every supply chain, every land, and anything else as African people to sustain our species, irrespective of whatever morals or whatever somebody else thinks. It does. I don't care what other races think. I'm out here to self-preservation, have that self-preservation for our species. So anything that we do to go ahead and maintain that, irrespective of someone else's morals or someone else's thoughts or ideologies, is immaterial to me, because only thing that's material to me is for us to be on top of the world. So the thing is I look at that and saying, I see what our record is, because I have not seen us go that route as quote unquote settler colonialists, conquerors, or anything else. I look at the record, and where's that record culminated? It culminates when I walk outside 5 minutes from my house and I see nothing but black folks living under tents or living or sleeping on the streets. Or I see them in prisons, or I see them, you know, having so-called gender wars instead of getting in the bed and producing as many babies as we can to build our population. I see them as, you know, young males that don't even know they're males anymore and, you know, decide they're going to be 3 different genders. I see that in the fact that we rely and depend on everybody else in order to keep us alive, whether it's from medical, food, information, international trade, technology, security, you know, i.e. defense, finance, you know, media. Others are we're depending on everything else for us to go ahead and have the mechanisms for survival. So clearly, I look at what's our reactionary position culminated in to this very day. And I've seen that for over 55 years. And I see the culmination of it is the fact that we're on someone else's so-called platform that they get money on, using the data of our voices. And we're just explaining exactly an environment that built us up to this point where somebody else is definitely profiting even on our time and on our knowledge, not us. So then I look at the other races and say, ads of settler colonials, whether it's the Chinese in Africa right now, or the so-called manifest destiny, or what you see in Is It Real going on with those small hats. Where has that in terms of the record culminated for them? They're pro-actionary. Okay, they don't care about morality, they care about their species. So I have to, you know, and I'm glad that you guys brought that up, because it really clarifies kind of the thing by using what I call the record, not history, not facts, not evidence, not beauty, and not truth, because that's in the eye of the beholder, but the record never changes. If it rained yesterday, I cannot say it unrained. So this is the record that I've seen and that we experience as I'm talking to you, you know, that we experience every time that we've invented almost everything that everyone uses, but yet we have not profit off the things that we invent. Okay, everyone else does. So clearly that might not be a reactionary. It might be just the fact that we might be inept or whatever. But the bottom line is, to be loquacious, not only would I say that we should not that we should go ahead and I won't say mirror, but outdo what these settler colonialists and these conquerors and these manifest destinies have done to us. Not only should we outdo that, but we should make it permanent to where nobody ever could do it again, because we're that powerful and that in control, not only of our destiny, but the entire planet. I'll pass the mic.
I
So
wanted to apologize to Afro Native. I want to apologize to Afro Native World. This was a thread, it seems, on Twitter. I didn't realize it was a thread. I hope that didn't change the prompt too much, you know. But next time, whenever you guys post a thread, you know, state it in the prompt. You know, Oni does that a lot. State it in the prompt, a thread, and that'll let me know to, you know, scroll down a bit more. Black Steel and then Bakari, because Bakari says something in the chat. I'd like him to spell out some more. So Black Steel, go ahead.
So number one, you don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water, right? So we're not going to get anywhere by duplicating the same methods of our oppressor. All right. So all that you will have is that you will have the same shit that the planet's already being destroyed. You'll have the same inequality. It'll just be what? Black people in charge of it? Do we really want to see that happen for our people? So no, to quote Fred Hampton, you don't fight fire with fire, you fight fire with water. I don't think, first of all, Black people, I don't believe that we have that that ability to wage war on an industrial. I think all human beings have the potential to be violent, but I think we only see it in the European a war the way that war has become almost an industry. We don't see that in other people. We don't see where they're willing to send entire generations of their young men to their death if it means holding on to an inch of ground. We don't see that type of stuff within other people. I think when we look at history, sometimes we skew history to a European worldview, and that's how they interact with their environment. I'm not saying African people did not do battle with one another, but you don't see the fanaticism, the way war has been raised almost to a virtue. Like war is a force that gives them meaning. We don't really see that in other cultures. So I just really just want to caution us to, when we look at these things, let's be careful of what we're emulating and what type of world we want to create. I don't think the European got it right. I think they've done more harm than good. And their desire to control and dominate the planet, they've they've really pushed us to the brink. And so I think that if we're going to really right the ship, we got to look at it to where do we want to go as a people? How do we create a world that we want to see as opposed to a world they've created? We have to expand our imagination. I think it's one of the biggest things the European took from us, was our imagination, to where we can't imagine a world now without their influence in it, without them setting the standard. How do we envision the world to where we want it to be, how we want it to look like? So I'll leave it there.
Let me let MG2 respond
But that,
quickly. MG2 and then Bakari. Go ahead, MG2. MG2, if you're talking, your mic is muted. All right, let's go to Bakari. Bakari, you said in the chat something about Hannibal. I want you to build on that.
Okay, what I said about Hannibal was Hannibal could have destroyed Rome, according to the story. He went out, he got troops where they were defeating Rome. He stopped. He went back to Carthage. What happened to Carthage after the end? What happened to Hannibal? This thing that we put all on white people, and I understand why a lot of black people here just say white people is the only ones that did everything bad. But I want to say his name was Singray or Tigray, the Mongolian god, the great Mongolian god in the big blue sky. Everything under the big blue sky belonged to the Mongolians. It wasn't just white folks that thought this. Matter of fact, they used to get their butts kicked all the time. All of them bowed down to Mongolia. What they say, Mongolia, the only reason they fell because they got caught allegedly, I guess, in a sea storm on their way over here to America. And that's what happened to what is called America now. And that's what happened to their warships. And yes, I want a world where black people is in charge. I do. I really want a world where black people, if I could do it, I want a world where black people is in charge. Power is not something that's shared. Power is not something that's given. Power is something that's taken. And these people took power from the people that was over them. The Ottoman Turks did what, they weren't them the white folks over there around Turkey and them Arabs. They did the same thing. But the ironic thing to me is the people that has been destroyed by everybody. Now the Mongolians didn't attack Africa, but the people that have been destroyed by all these militaries, all of a sudden think they have the magic spice and the magic juice where the world is just going to be and everybody is going to be equal and we should just share everything. That's not how the world was designed. I'm sorry, we're animals, but that's not how it was designed. That's why when I talk, I say the power we can have in this country right now is the power in our communities if we stuck together. But this started with propaganda. But since we have fallen for the propaganda, we don't deal with one another. We have fallen for the propaganda where we think we ain't worth a damn. So we don't deal with one another on a respectful basis. We don't deal with each other wanting to talk. We can't deal with one another finding the positive, because the same people we say we don't want to emulate, you emulate them all the damn time. That's the crazy thing. We don't want to emulate them fighting, because consequences and repercussions come with fighting. But saying black men ain't nothing come from white folk. Say the European. Saying black women ain't nothing come from the European. Thinking you ain't worth nothing, that's come from the European. Saying the Jews run the world, that is clearly Nazi, KKK. You can go back 40. Some white people wrote something down. Now black people have run with it and say, yeah, that small group of white people run the. We do. We say that's absolutely propaganda, because you don't know. The people that you say you don't want to be like, that's exactly what we're like, especially when it comes to each other. But we don't want to hear that part, though. That part is hard to fathom. But that's it. Just listen to us talk. Who told you? Who told us we was the N-word? The people we say we don't want to be like, the people we don't want to emulate, is the people that we emulate. Except when we're saying, you know what, we're going to take power. We're going to take power in our community. Oh, he's taking power in the community. Oh, we don't want to go against the Arabs. We don't want to go against the Chinamans, the Japs, the Koreans, the Vietnamese. But when it comes to a black business, oh, see, they got to do this. See, they do this wrong and they do that wrong. Oh, we already just like them. For the most part, I'm going to stop saying we. Because I'm not part of that. There's a lot of black people that's already just like them. Already.
So
I'm just saying, you already just like them.
But we shouldn't be like them. So you agree we shouldn't be like them, right?
You already like them.
So we agree we shouldn't be them, right? Is that what we're coming to the conclusion? We already like them. Should not be.
What I said.
Hold on, I had to mute both your mics. When Bakari's talking, if we turn our mics on because of what this message said, is you're gonna get the feedback. So you gotta mute your mic when Bakari's speaking, and Bakari, when you're done speaking, mute your mic. So let's go back to Black Steel and then Bakari.
So to your point, Bakari, and I agree with you, you say we already emulate them, right? So therefore, what you're saying is that we should emulate them more? Or should we say we should not emulate? Because from what I'm hearing from you is that a lot of black people have become maladapted due to our conditioning, to our oppression. So the response to that maladaptation is to become more maladaptive, or should we pull back and try to create our own world instead of trying to do and copy what they did to gain control of the world and push it to the brink? Like, we're literally on the verge of a third world war, but that's what we need to really emulate. I'm just a little confused by that.
What we need to emulate is having power, so you can control everything about you. Control your resources, control your community, control the greatest resource ever came into this country, us. You say we're on the brink of a third world war, but in all honesty, black people is not. We don't even have a damn military. So we're still sitting and waiting and hoping don't nobody bomb us. Or we will go beg the dude in Russia, in Russians, how they feel about black people. Don't like when I say that, because they want those white people from Eastern Europe to defeat the white people from Western Europe, because the ones from Eastern Europe, I guess they will be okay. But talk to the black people from Russia. find out how they feel. But see, we haven't even created anything to defend ourselves. So I'm telling you, we ain't got to fight to control your communities here. We don't have to fight to control our communities here. But living up to the black business challenge is hard for a lot of black people to do. So when you say emulate them more, no, not emulate them more. Stop emulating them and want to be a strong black man who want to have control of our communities and have control, wanting to be in control of your own destiny, want to be in control of your community, want to kick all them foreigners out of your damn community, taking all of your resources, want to stop people from taking the best of you. That's not being like them. That's absolutely opposite of what they want. That's opposite of what they want. But the things we do is not opposite of what I'm gonna say it because I'm gonna stop saying we because I don't do it. But the things that a lot of black people do is not opposite of what they want. You do what they want. That's why we constantly fight each other. They don't have to. It's almost say this demo. It's on like, what is it? Autopilot now for a lot of black people. Are you the mic?
Yeah, I want to chime in briefly in terms of what was said by both sides. It's interesting though, because I have my hardliner brothers on the show, but in the form of MG2 and Brother Bakari, they arguing for Herzl's position, Theodore Herzl, because these brothers are nationalists, not nationalist minded, and they don't take a reactionary view. They take a more of a actionary, we go bomb first kind of mentality, which is fine. And then you have my moderate brother like Black Steel. He said, well, we trying to do something else. We're trying to create a different kind of world. My question though, to Black Steel, brothers like Black Steel, them is, how do you create that world? How do you go about creating that world? Because Black Steel is a socialist brother, socialist or communist minded brother. Castro them to create the world that they was trying to create. They did it through force. They did it. They had to fight Batista to gain control of that island through fighting, through murder, through killing, through savagery, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, they was able to create the world that they wanted to through fighting. Then you have Maurice Bishop them. They had to create that world by Al-Qum, to remove, well, the guy, he wasn't there at the time, but to maintain themselves in that position, they had to use force to maintain themselves in that position. They was ready to go up against the most mightiest military on the face in the face of humanity, which is the United States government, to maintain that world that they had created. So my question becomes, how do you create this world that you are suggesting? Because you don't want to do it like the way of the other forceful people, might makes right, and using the gun, using force, using military, using force to create their world. How do you go about doing it in the other way? Because you said that we should do it in another way. Which give me an example of that way. That's where I am with the question.
Okay,
That's my question.
So first of all, I'm not a pacifist, right? So I definitely know that we're not going to be able to go. These crackers are not going to let this go without blood being shed. So I definitely understand that part. I'm under no illusion that we're going to be able to just cooperate or, buy our way or build back or business our way out of this situation. We're definitely going to have to pick up arms and defend ourselves and take back what was taken from us. The only thing I would say is that I don't want to have where the European is an industrial warfare mindset to where their whole culture is geared toward war, where we have a conspicuous consumption problem. I don't want us to have the mindset of the European does, where everything is a commodity, everything is for their use, everything is about manifest destiny. So anybody who gets on our way, we step on them. I certainly believe that we're going to have to engage in violence. We're going to have to engage in warfare to build the world we want to build. But I don't want it to look like it looks now. So I guess if I'm being vague, I'm under no illusions that this is going to be done peacefully. So yeah. I just want to say that. So
Can I chime in?
Go ahead, of course.
Yes, I'm glad you said that, Black Steel. I mean, I'm loving this conversation, man. I'm glad I'm listening to you guys. I had a friend who was a firefighter, and going back to fighting fire with fire, and then we're just going to move real quickly from that. One of the major reasons they do that is so therefore it's kind of like creating a bridge so they could starve the real fire from the fuel that it needs, as well as the oxygen that it needs so it cannot spread. That they do fight fires with fire. They've done that quite successfully for a very long time. And it makes a lot of sense. When it comes to us, I don't, and personally, the reason I have to say, not just personally, but let's just talk the record, not just history or whatever. Whether we emulate, as Brother Bakari would say quite eloquently, or have the bottom line is this. I look at the record, the fact that we have not emulated, and I say, where has it gotten us, or where has it not gotten us? We would not be having this conversation if the path of not emulating did not exist. We would probably be having a different conversation. When it comes to manifest destiny and conquering and taking supply chains and everything else, I tend to ask myself, well, how did my competitor, whether it's white, Asian, Arab, Russian, or anyone else, how did they get what they got? Is what my brother previously said. Hey, they got it clearly by doing that manifest destiny, by creating commoditizing everything, including human bodies, called enslaved Africans. So clearly it worked for them. It worked quite successfully because it also alludes to something else when you were talking about emulating. What language are we speaking? That is not a language, as Dr. Amos Wilson said, that is an African language. That was forced upon us in order for us to survive. So clearly, if I have to emulate in order to survive on somebody else's tongue, I don't think it would be wise for me not to emulate the ways of war in order for us to go ahead and not have to use their tongue. And I say that abstract in ways, or not have to use their economy, or not have to use their whatever culture, whatever. If I have to emulate the ways of war in order to get back to African being, then why not? Because clearly not emulating, I'm still speaking their language and I'm using their so-called internet. So I'm not saying that that's good, bad, or other. I'm just saying that I look at the record. I look at, well, what now? What do you do then? Okay, if that's not, and I'm not saying not to go that route. I like to use, as like Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. I like to remix it and say by all means necessary. I will use their emulation. I will use our innovation. When I say our innovation, you're not emulating anyone when you innovate. I love African innovation. I want us to definitely come up with our own ways of going ahead and conquering the world. But I'm not going to distance, and I'm not going to go ahead and deny, and I'm definitely not going to go ahead and not use something that has definitely proven itself successful. Clearly, as I say, what language are we speaking? So clearly, whatever they've done to conquer the world has definitely made an impact, even on this conversation, quite extensively, as well as what you do with your time in order to survive, whether you have a job or whether you don't. You're living in a so-called society that others have created for you. They manage for you. They put up their protective mechanisms, not for you, but for themselves, with you as a commodity. So my thing is like, well, it would be a Nirvanic, very blissfully unaware, kind of fantastical, and I want to say laissez-faire mentality for myself, maybe not you guys, for me to say, hey, I don't want to go ahead and emulate those guys because, they're doing demonic things, or they're doing this, or they've got, conquering, and they're commoditizing everything. I would love that. That would be something that I could sit back and say, yeah, it's a fantasy. But when I look at the reality of, well, if somebody else has some really good MMA skills and they can kick some butt, because clearly they've kicked my butt for, like 6-7 centuries, then clearly it would possibly be in my best interest to go ahead and start getting not only their skills down, but even my own. That's why I said I don't mind emulating. I will emulate and I will innovate. I will create my own, as well as take my enemy's secrets so I know his chess game. If I know how he plays his game, he doesn't know how I play my game, then that gives me the advantage. And I understand, overstand, and understand, where a lot of folks are thinking, whether, whatever frame of reference you want to use, whether you want to use it as conservative, liberal, socialist, imperialist, capitalist, whatever, those are European terms that I could care less about. My thing is, I will do whatever it takes, emulating or not, innovating or not. I don't care what it is. I'll do whatever it takes, going over and above, for us as African people to get not only back to our natural selves, but to go ahead and save this planet that clearly we have definitely gone AWOL on, because again, this conversation wouldn't even be happening. I'll pass the mic.
Appreciate that, MG too. You guys seem to be enjoying the conversation. I could tell from the chat. This last comment here, Trig Happy says, I think everyone agrees that you need force, but is it that force defensive or is it offensive? And by offensive, do you want to conquer the world? What does that look like? So Afro-Native World also mentions Yurugu has a lot of info or food for thought in there on this topic, so make sure you check it out. He said make it required reading. Yeah, so make sure you guys check it out. Does anyone have any last words for this prompt?
Yeah, can I respond to what Trigger Happy said about force, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
We can be forceful if we choose without without even throwing a blow, squeezing a trigger, or any of that. And I'm speaking right here where we living at right now, because first you got to control where you at before you can control anything else. That's my take, how I see it, right? But you can be forceful by just forcefully. We ain't going to nan Chinaman in our community. We gonna keep our economics amongst us. If we don't own this laundromat, and when I'm saying we, I'm not saying a black person. I'm literally saying we as a community-owned business. If we don't own this corner store, if we don't own this, it will not be in our community, and we are not going. So yes, we do it by force, by forcefully not going, because you're gonna have to force yourself not to go. Let's say, yeah, man, but they right there and I needed this. So what? Go an extra 10 miles, go an extra mile, go an extra 5 miles. Put it in your head that we want our community. We should be in control of the economics. We should be in control of the stuff that's going on in our communities where we live, where our children live. We shouldn't have to go in on store where they say hurry up and buy. So yeah, sometimes you have to be forceful. And then when they on their way out, we can break some windows and stuff. But you can, yes, but we're gonna have to be forceful to take what we want, to take us back. We got to be forceful. I'll get the mic.
Appreciate that, Bakari. Anthony McPhail says even Mao Zedong said power comes from the barrel of a gun. Afro-Native World mentions how he loved to hear the panel discuss books like Yurugu. You know, that crossed my mind before. You guys can post prompts from books that are, common in the community. That so the likelihood is higher that people have read it, or at least people will have access to it. But definitely, you guys can post prompts about, a passage or something in a book. Make sure it has an element that we could post on the screen or something. Should we be topic number 4 tonight?